This is Jason Saft, and he is one of the best, if not the best stager in New York City and or the United States. It's pretty cool watching his career. I have a personal story about him because when I first started here at Compass, you were a broker, one of the first agents actually at Compass, and you were a big agent. I could see from a distance, but you were on my floor, that you were very staging heavy, and slowly but surely you just kind of migrated more into staging, and it was very interesting to see just from a distance. Yeah. We've worked together on a couple projects, and the thing about staging that I've noticed is that you really see it looks the same all the time, and your stuff doesn't. It's very, you walk into, even if I don't know that you've done it, I know you've done it, which is pretty cool. What's the difference between a stager and an interior designer?
So the main difference between staging and interior design is essentially when you're hiring an interior designer, you're hiring an interior designer to create something for you with all of your tastes, your preferences, your favorite colors, your favorite materials, the way you want to live with your family, your functionality. That's when you're hiring an interior designer. You can share your Pinterest board with them. I'm sure they would love to see it. When you're hiring a stager to rework your property that you're trying to sell, you are hiring a marketing professional to come in and create something aspirational, something that fits in aesthetically, and something that is going to appeal and connect with an audience. And often for me, when you talk about that brokerage background, that's the thing that I bring that a lot of other stagers can't. I spent almost 20 years as a real estate agent. I was one of the first employees of Compass. A lot of people just get so turned off by what physically they see, and a lot of projects that we get brought into, particularly like a new development, are projects where the layouts and configurations are not as obvious.
Yeah.
We worked on a few penthouses or top floor units at 1 Clinton in Brooklyn Heights.
I love that project.
Incredible building. I have a bunch of friends who own and live there. This sort of functional layout that people could just process and understand.
7 years ago, staging was really a luxury that you would only see in a couple of listings, and now it's a prerequisite.
Yeah.
And it's even more so, like, good stagers are of the utmost importance. It's not even about staging.
Right.
It's like good staging.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I remember as a buyer's agent, you'd be touring someone through an apartment and they'd whisper in my ear, like, just get me out of here. I hate this apartment. I'd be like, what do you mean? Like, what do you hate about it? Like, the price per square foot is fantastic. The building is wonderful. The door staff, like, there's potential for upside. It has all the renovations you wanted. They'd be like, oh, but it's red. And it's like, oh my God, like, you can change that very easily, very cheaply. But it is interesting. Like, a lot of people cannot get past sort of physically what they see with someone else's stuff. And again, the deeper part of that is often, someone may be moving out of an apartment that maybe 30, 40 years ago, like, they were sort of the audience for the neighborhood. And now you have these newer people moving in, and there's just a difference in age and aesthetic. And sometimes someone just feels like I'm in someone's, like, used home. And especially in the pandemic, right? Like, there was that feeling of, like, I don't want something dirty, and everybody wanted something new. And so I think there's that part of it. The more interesting thing for me is we're often brought into projects, and a lot of it is within new development where the layouts and configurations are challenging. And it's funny because it's like Goldilocks. It's either too big or too small. Recently, we worked on a series of apartments at 1 Clinton, which is a beautiful brand new condominium in Brooklyn Heights. It's one of, like, the only buildings with views. There's parking, stunning apartments. I have a lot of friends who own and live there, but some of the larger apartments could not sell, and they had these, like, expansive great rooms, and the feedback was, like, people didn't understand how to lay it out. Like, they didn't think it was functional. It was really a matter of, like, we came in, segmented the space, created zones, and they immediately, one sold after the next, after the next, after the next. And then sometimes, we live in this age of, like, micro apartments now, where people walk into a very small space and they just sort of say, like, I can't live here. But then when you lay it out and stage it and do it to scale, all of a sudden people realize, like, oh, actually I can live here. and again, a lot of it is like you're on a specific budget. As a, back in the day as a buyer's agent, I used to explain to people like, don't forget when it's smaller, like this is your starting point, right? Like if you're going from being a renter to now becoming a homeowner, the next step is like you build up equity, and at a certain point, then you'll be able to leverage this into something larger. But to your other point about, the difference in time, like when I started in real estate 20 years ago, staging was something you saw at the top end.
Yeah.
And new development sales galleries, right? Like they were either selling in a construction site or selling off-site, and would build out a model residence so that people could understand and see the finishes and get a sense of the space. But now it's really become the standard, and it's become more affordable. There are more people doing it like me. But I think that the biggest shift is habits, right? Like 20 years ago when I started in real estate, there was no Zillow, there was no StreetEasy, there was no iPhone, right? Like people were just sort of getting Blackberries at a certain, and it didn't have that kind of information. And along with that came social media. And now, everything that you see from like a hamburger to a house is this highly stylized, well-presented, like detailed visual experience. And you couple that with like the Uberization of things. Like you want something, you tap a button, and your food's delivered. Your car is there. You go on Amazon now, it's same day delivery. Whole Foods, same day delivery. And so that sort of experience is filtering into everything else. And so for people looking for apartments to buy, there's a lot of people that don't want to do work anymore. There's a lot of people that walk into an empty space and they don't understand it, right? Like it's not like you look at a bun, but you see this beautiful, perfect hamburger that's been composed, photographed, like the sauce is dripping in the right way, the pickle's coming out just like that. And people want that same thing with a home that they're buying as well. Like they sort of need to be shown, this is exactly how you can live. And this is not just how you can live, but this is sort of like the most aspirational, this is for you.
100%.
And I think younger buyers now, like they want to see a space that like visually talks to them. And that's where we come in and do that.
One thing I noticed about your industry is that also it used to be about staging was to show scale. And now staging is to show options of aesthetic too.
Yeah, it's shifted. It's like anything else. It's grown. It's augmented. It's interesting. The original sort of in the early days with staging, and if you Google like, how to stage a home to put it up for sale, it'll often talk about depersonalizing it, removing this. And it's funny because one of the things that I sort of pride myself on is like, we're personalizing the properties, but we're not doing it in the same way. Like when we talk about depersonalizing it, you're getting rid of your wedding photos, pictures of your kids, you're like all these mementos, all these things that say like, this is our home, this is where we live, this is our life. But sort of stripping that back, but then we're always bringing in personality, we're bringing in color, we're bringing in things that are exciting. They also used to say like, you don't want anything that, can distract from the property, but I sort of approach it from, well, if someone's going out on a Sunday and looking at like 15 apartments, houses, whatever it is, I want to know that I'm bringing stuff in that if they can't remember the address, if they can't remember the location, they're like, oh yeah, that was the one with like that great blue couch and like that piece of art that I took a picture of and I'm trying to find where it is. Like we get that feedback from people all the time. I mean, it's really interesting, especially now with social media. I often get people who find me who say like, I toured this apartment. It didn't work for us, but I just wanted to like reach out and meet you. Like I wanted to see your work. And it's great. It feels good that we're creating something that's so memorable that someone is saying like, this isn't the right space. Like I gave it a chance, but I need, that extra bedroom. I need more of a view. I need things that this doesn't offer me, but I kept going back to it to the point where like, I just wanted to reach out and see maybe of something else, or I'd love to see more of your work, or I'll get asked a lot to design their spaces, and then we just refer them out to a designer.
I know you've had, and including, we've worked on some success stories together, but do you have like one specific success story that, I don't know, that sticks out?
So it's funny, since we're at the start of 2024, we did all of our year-end metrics and recaps recently. And so There were a lot, but my favorite one, and it's funny because, like, we did like $40 million and 25 and like some really crazy shit. But there was one apartment, and it's the smallest project we did. It probably wasn't even 200 square feet. It was a 5th floor walk up off Perry Street, or on Perry Street rather. And so this 5th floor unrenovated studio apartment had been on the market, I think in total with 11 different agents at, I can't tell you how many different prices, over 5 years. It had 1,500 days on market. And the new agent who I've worked with and we've had like great successes, she opened up the door and I was like, oh my God, like, of course, like there's this giant, bizarre crescent couch in the, like, there's only a main space, and then there's like a kitchenette and a bathroom that is like a sliver. And I was like, where do you sleep? Where do you do anything? And it was just like, it was very ramshackle. And so the thing is, again, as a real estate agent, or former real estate agent, you do learn and you find out that there is someone for every property. And if you position it the right way, someone will buy it. And so for me, like, the West Village is one of the most dynamic neighborhoods. Yeah. It's one of the most expensive neighborhoods. It's always had an allure. It just, the people who love it, it shifts every, like, let's say 10 years. The people who are attracted to Greenwich Village or West Village 10 years ago are different from the people who are there now.
100%.
Obviously, like, it went from lots of apartment buildings to the uber wealthy coming in, buying them up, converting them to single family houses. There's a lot less housing. There's so many new restaurants, bars, everything, and everyone wants to live in the West Village. And the thing is, this apartment is going to be someone's crash pad.
Yeah.
Like, someone just sort of rationalizes it with their business manager. Like, it makes much more sense to buy a property that we could put in a company name.
Yeah.
And instead of getting a hotel, and this way I have my stuff here, and that's what it was. It was like a hotel room. And so just went in and sort of approached it like that. Like, this will be someone's crash pad. Like, they're going to get in Friday. They may not come home until like Sunday night. They're just going to want to pass out and go home and keep their stuff here. And so I designed like just a fun, cool, interesting space that had seating, dining, bed, everything laid out. And it was funny. It sold to that exact profile. There was one deal that happened immediately, and then it fell apart. And what was really interesting is that I like checking in on the project because I was so invested in it. And the agent sort of told me, like, there's a bit of a questionable story about these people who like disappeared right like the day before the contract was going to get signed. And then like 2 months later, she forwarded me an article that was in the news about this couple that was and she's like, these were the buyers of the apartment. And thankfully someone else came in and scooped it up right away. But we had it on market for less than 4 months. And if the people who didn't, it would have been within 2 weeks. But that was 5 years versus 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And again, there's that association of like staging would only be at the like 432 Park Avenue, but you need it in a lot of places. And, there are sometimes in some markets where it's about the ROI and how much more you're going to make. Mm-hmm. If the market says you could make $1 million, but we can come in and you can invest like 15,000, you can make 2.5. Mm-hmm. Like, why wouldn't you do that? That's a great investment for like 4 days of setup. But we're coming out of a market right now where a lot of times it's the difference of the property actually selling or not. And then when you look at the monthlies and the carrying costs, we're often at a fraction of all that. Like, when someone has spent a year of carrying costs to have an apartment just sit empty, it makes no sense. And once you have that year on market, you're kind of doomed in terms of pricing, because unless you 100% you go in and you do something different, like, you have handed everyone else leverage. Everyone goes, hey, this has been on market for 1 year. There's no one's buying it. I'm going to buy it, but I'm only going to give you this. Yeah. And like, at that point, you typically have to sell. Now, here in New York City, it is a little bit different. I mean, we work on a lot of properties. Like, there's a townhouse that's being negotiated right now. It's been overpriced, and it's been sitting on market empty for like, I think 8 to 10 months. But to these people who own it, like, that 8 to 10 months of loss is like nothing.
I know.
And they're very much in the mindset, and we have a lot of this here in New York City, that's like, I will only sell it if I get this number. Even if that's not based on the market, comps, whatever it is. It just, they're in a position to say, hey, I can just sit on this $10 million house. I'm not going to sell it for 9.5, even though this is the only offer, we've ever had.
Totally. And just actually like also circling back to those small apartments, those are actually in a weird way the most important to sell, because I've seen those apartments, those West Village apartments that you're talking about, where literally an architect owns it and there's a place for everything, a place for their little book, and
you bring something in, you take something out.
Yeah, and exactly, and then they're emptied, and then someone puts a bed in there and a coffee table, and it just doesn't make any sense. Yeah. It's always in real estate. The smaller the deals, the smaller the apartment, the more,
bigger the headache.
The bigger the headache, and the more intricate you have to like go into.
Yeah, no, I remember it well. It was always like the most challenging ones are those small ones, and you do have to remember, like for a lot of people, the reason they're so difficult is it's so emotional. It's typically a first purchase, not like the pied-à-terre stuff, but some of these small entry-level apartments, like this is their first time going through all this, right? And so it's terrifying. Like,
totally. I
mean, I just bought my apartment, and it's like, you put that 20% down, you've got to do this, and the next thing you know, you look at your bank account, and you're just like, oh my God, I have no money left. So I always sort of understand why it can be so emotional, intense, and layered, but it really is. I'm just a believer, and when I talk with sellers, I always say, look, if you don't hire me, hire someone. Just do this the right way. Do it up front. Don't do this process 6 to 8 months after you've been on market, because then you're weakened your position and you don't have leverage, and you've handed someone leverage. That's it.
I also think it's amazing to me how someone will spend $150,000 in a kitchen or buy some crazy reclaimed floor that they have to import from like Oregon or whatever. But then when it comes to the staging, they're learning now, but it used to be that it was a hard sell to a lot of people. And in fact, that is the greatest investment on return, because you really can, you don't have to, even though it sounds like a big number, it really isn't compared to, buyers thinking $50,000 increments.
Right.
And if it feels right, 50,000 is nothing.
Right.
So it's really one of the best investments. And good staging can actually hide a lot of, it doesn't have to be a mid-condition apartment.
Well, that is the point of it. Like I always explain, you're not hiring me just to make this pretty, right? Like, you're hiring me to identify the flaws, fix them, mask things, like enhance what's going to make it more sellable, more relatable, and frankly, more valuable, right? Yeah. Like, that's the goal is, like, we're doing this aesthetic marketing to ensure the least amount of days on market with the highest close sale price. And so I understand some people's hesitation. It's often someone who has not been through the process in quite some time. It's often someone who has said, I just spent $150,000 doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm sort of tapped out. It's someone who often doesn't understand the difference. Like, there are times where someone says to me, the agent will call, okay, we have 2 proposals. You're here, they're here. Can you come here? And so I always tell them, like, I'm happy to consider who is the other proposal from. I'd like to see their work. And 9 out of 10 people will tell you who it is. And again, it's like, I don't need to see their proposal, but I'm often able to say, well, there's a reason that they're a lot less expensive, or even like a difference of $2,000. Like, that difference of $2,000 could be the difference of making $50,000 to $100,000, right? And so a lot of staging, it's not an art form for a lot of people, and it is sort of simple. Like, I put a couch and I put a chair, but like, I'm coming at it from a completely different perspective. Like, I'm trying to create an environment so that essentially, like, it starts at lead generation. Like, a consumer is looking online, they're on their phone, you're seeing these little thumbnails, and like, my focus is, how do I make it so that someone looking at 20 thumbnails on their phone is going to click contact agent, right? As opposed to, like, I'll get to that. And it's very much like Tinder or whatever it is, right? Like, you're either like swiping right or you're swiping left. And so how do you get someone, what can you do to make someone say, like, wow, I need to see that. And that's the feedback that we always get is people come and say, I really want to see this apartment because, or the agent will come in, will call me and say, it was really funny. Like this couple walked in and they were like, where's this piece of art? I want to see this. Like, oh, take me to the bedroom because I really wanted to see this chair that I wanted to buy in a store. And they're like, they know your work. And like, once they're there, the part of something that's done so well is, I don't remember the exact statistic, but I think in New York on average, like people will spend like 10 or 15 minutes in an apartment. Like my goal is to get them there for 45 minutes.
Yeah. I just want to close with 3 questions. What's your favorite furniture or home decor shop right now in New York City or anywhere? Best resources for either art or furniture, and who's your favorite designer right now?
It's hard to pick one. It's like, who's your favorite child? Thankfully, I only have one child. For everyone, there's like the go-to resources, and so I love CB2. I work with them quite a bit. They have an incredible stable of designers who are doing great little collections with them, and also I love Sarah Sherman Samuel. Is one of my favorite interior designers. I've loved watching her work evolve. She does a collection with Lulu in Georgia. I own every piece. I buy everything. I think she has an incredible perspective. She has an atelier line that's a bit more expensive and more sort of like couture, but has made things affordable. And I say that in quotes because one thing I've learned, like meeting people all across the country and through social media is, what one person considers affordable may be out of reach for someone. What one person might be the everyday piece is someone's single investment piece. But those are like my 2 go-tos, and I love her work. In terms of decor or like art, I always tell people, go to your thrift stores. Like thrift and consignment stores are probably the most wonderful place to find original, really special artwork. Doing a lot of estate work here, like when people pass away, sometimes like just family members don't want stuff, they're far away. Sometimes the entire contents of someone's life just ends up in a thrift store, right? And so you may find things from travels from 50, 60, 70 years ago that you will never find in a store.
That's so true.
And I'm really big on art fairs. And so I'm lucky that here in New York, we have so many, from Gowanus to Red Hook Open Studios, to the other art fair, to Freeze, to the Affordable Art Fair. There are so many places. You just have to start to look. And like, once you find one, you'll start to find another and another. That's where when people are often like, where did you find that? It's often like through young art fairs that really have pieces that are affordable, that are accessible, and you can start to just build a collection. Like you don't always have to spend a lot of money to have something that looks really good. It's more like the pursuit of something really interesting. And that's when like your eye just starts to get trained over time. Favorite designer, it's another one. It's hard. Like there's so many different people, and there's so many different now, like, I think when you said designer 20 years ago, it had to be like an interior designer who's moving walls, redoing houses. Whereas now, you have people like Colin King, who's really more a stylist and a creative director, or someone like Athena Calderon. But I do, I love Sarah Sherman Samuel's work, Billy Cotton, Neil Beckstead, Nate Berkus. There's so many, and there's so many different aesthetics and styles and different things. So it's hard to pick just one, but those are a few.
Cool. Well, listen, thank you. And it's great seeing you. And I'll see you out in the field too.
All right.